and I will navigate along. So again, we're recording. I just want to say a big welcome to everybody who is joining us for our February meetup. Today we're going to be going over a couple of different things. We're going to be having Sam Hoult, who's our special guest speaker for tonight, who's going to be introducing us to his tool, Data Importer, which I've used a bit myself, and I think it's a really great tool. And I know Luke's used it a bit as well. And so we're going to have a look at that tonight. After that, we're going to be going into Spring 22 highlights, and we do have some, and probably no spoiler alert as such, but all of mine's on floor. For those who know me, that's probably not a surprise. And so we'll go through some spring highlights, and then we've also got a certification voucher that we're going to give away via one of everybody's favorite things that we've done in our group, which is a duck race. So we'll bring back the old classic duck race. But that's all that you need to hear from me at the moment. So I'm going to look to pass over to Sam. I'll stop sharing my screen. And what we'll say is if you've got any questions, feel free to post them in the chat, Sam, you can handle questions. We can let you handle questions however you please, whether you're happy to be asked them during the presentation or whether you want to hold off to the end. That is completely up to you. But feel free to pop questions into the chat and we'll work through them.
And also just as well, Mark, if you don't mind, just before we, as I say, by way of introduction to Sam, I think we get a good insight into the product that Sam's created, but I think Sam's a good story of a trailblazer as well. I think we connected via social media and we've had a number of chats, and I think it'd be good to hear a bit about Sam, his journey, how he got into this. He's been quite open in his development of the tool, which I like from a distance. So I think it's good because we get to see the tool, but we get to see Sam as well. So I think they're two good spectacles to bring to the group tonight. So looking forward to it.
Cool. Thank you. Yes, I can just share my screen here. It should take over. Cool. So yeah, thank you guys, everyone, for joining in tonight and taking your time out. I'll just give you a bit of a background of myself. So my name is Sam Hoult. As you'll probably hear from the accent, I'm originally from New Zealand, so from Auckland in New Zealand. I worked at a financial services company for 3 years and kind of became the accidental admin there. I was working in like a customer facing role. We didn't have any internal Salesforce admin resources at the time. We'd kind of had an implementation partner come in and implement Salesforce for us and kind of left us to it. And so being the new fresh blood in the organization, if you like, I kind of took it upon myself to find different tasks and different things I could do. And Salesforce was one of those things. And eventually it led to me having a full-time position, focusing specifically on the data side of things, but also a lot of the kind of Salesforce admin tasks. And then moved over to Germany in 2019, where I was working as a consultant, again, focusing on Einstein Analytics and also Sales Cloud, working with large financial institutions. And that was for 2 years until I quit that job last year and took a couple months off. And then was kind of thinking about what I wanted to do. I kind of knew I wanted to build a product in the Salesforce ecosystem. Started reaching out to people on Twitter and LinkedIn, kind of seeing what issues they were having, looking on things like the Idea Exchange, looking through other product reviews and stuff, until I landed on Data Importer, which I actually launched just in December of last year. So it's still pretty new. And the approach that I've kind of taken, which Luke mentioned briefly, is I'm building in public. So it's kind of a movement which I saw mostly on Twitter, where people, and I think particularly during the pandemic stage, have been, had a lot more time at home, building side businesses and stuff like that. And building in public is essentially just being completely open and honest with what you're doing in terms of new features you're looking to add, stats around user numbers, revenue, features that you've been adding, and kind of taking the approach of being open and honest, building a following, that way getting people interested in the product. And so I thought it would be at least an interesting thing to do, partly because I haven't really seen much in the Salesforce ecosystem in terms of App Exchange partners or people who have built apps on the App Exchange kind of publishing things like revenue numbers, user. It was, to me at least, a bit of a black box. And so I thought it would be a good opportunity for me to learn, and also for other people who are thinking about building an app to kind of learn about the process as well. I'm obviously working by myself, so I don't have any other people kind of developing the product or doing marketing or any of that kind of stuff. I've done it all by myself, at least so far. But what I found really helpful is that the ecosystem in Salesforce is so strong that people are really willing to help out. So when I was kind of starting to build the product, I would just ask people on Twitter or on LinkedIn, hey, I'm working on this product around data importing. Is there anyone that would find use in kind of testing it out and trying it out? And people would reply back, which I don't think I would kind of get if I was being a lot more secretive with the product. So, but yeah, so I think going forward, if the product continues to be kind of successful and grow bigger, I will need to hire people, especially around like support and creating new features. But as of now, I'm kind of building it by myself. And I'm kind of building the product outside of Salesforce in a way, in that I'm not listed on the App Exchange, so I haven't gone down that path. And the product isn't built natively on Salesforce. And I guess as part of my discovery phase, I kind of evaluated, should I build this natively on Salesforce, yes or no? And I came to the conclusion pretty quickly, no, because I didn't have the developer skills to be able to build all of the API integrations and all of that stuff on the Salesforce side of things. And then whether to list on the App Exchange straight away, yes or no. One was a money side of things. So you're paying kind of $2,000 to $3,000 to list on the App Exchange. And then it's also a time consideration. So it takes, anywhere from kind of 2 to 5 months, let's say, depending on the complexity, to go through the whole process of, you have to put together a bit of a business plan. You have to have your app go through a security review. You have to provide marketing material and all of that stuff. And so because I was kind of doing it by myself and I didn't want to have anything kind of holding me up in the process unnecessarily, I decided to go with launching the product outside of the App Exchange at first. I also talked with some of the users who had been using it as to whether, seeing a product not on the App Exchange would be a complete turnoff. Some people said, yes, they have an internal company policy that they can only use apps if they're on the App Exchange. But the majority of people said, no, that's not really an issue for them. And so I decided to continue building outside of the Salesforce platform. And so what are some of the things that have come from building in public? I've obviously been invited to things like this, the user group talks, which are really, really cool. Because I just get to meet new people in the ecosystem that I potentially wouldn't have the chance to meet otherwise. And it's just a good way to, I guess, get more feedback and visibility on the product. And another thing would be product reviews. So there's been a couple people who just, I guess, out of their own interest have done reviews of the product. So one of them on the left there is Ike, who did a review of the product. Some people might think that it's paid or anything, but it definitely isn't. And there's another one from a person in India who runs a user group there who also did a similar thing. And I kind of just stumbled upon it. He didn't actually mention that he was doing it, which is cool. I just suddenly one day on LinkedIn saw that there was this review of the product. So it's cool to have things like that happen. And I definitely don't think at this stage in the product that would happen unless I was kind of being open and just being really visible as much as I can on platforms like LinkedIn and Twitter. I've also had the opportunity to meet other app developers who kind of have seen my posts pop up and have sparked up conversations around their experiences building apps in the ecosystem, what's worked for them, what hasn't worked for them. So I've spoken with some people who are kind of in a similar stage to me, in an early stage, 1 to 2 people kind of size. So it's been really interesting learning their experiences, and they definitely influenced my decision not to go down the App Exchange route at first. And then I've also managed to speak with some people who work on some pretty big apps in the ecosystem around things which to do with kind of scaling a product, marketing, which I will hopefully all going to plan need to focus on in the future. So it's definitely opened up lots of different avenues and paths, which have been really cool in these first couple of months where everything's kind of new and scary. Oh, don't need that to play right now. Cool, so I'll go into a brief demo of the product. I will try not to make it salesy or anything like that. And if you guys have any questions at any point in time around the demo, feel free to just type them in the chat, or if you want to, you can just unmute and ask them. And then there'll also be some time at the end to ask any questions you might have about my experience of building a product or anything else. Cool. So this is what the product looks like. I've tried to keep the interface kind of as simple and as clean as I can. My own experience with some of the other products that are out there are that they are either look like they were kind of built in the 90s, or they have so much going on that it takes a long time to kind of get started. So I wanted to build something that was flexible enough that people who had, external data that they needed to connect to, or some cleaning of data that they needed to do, could use the product as well, but also someone who just has a CSV file that they would just want to quickly get in, upload, and be done, could use the product. And so I'll give you guys a quick showing of what it kind of looks like going through the process. So on the left here, you can connect to different Salesforce instances. So you can connect to production, sandboxes, staging, however many you kind of need. You can also connect to external data sources. So here, for example, I have an SFTP connection where some CSV data is being stored. You can also connect to external databases. So I have a database here, which is sitting on Heroku, and also some file sharing or file storage platforms like OneDrive, Dropbox, and Google Drive is also in development at the moment as well. So I'm trying to kind of cover off the main kind of data storage places that different companies would have, and are kind of actively developing more as I go on. And so what can you do from there? You can create jobs. So these are the different imports, upserts, deletes that you might have. And so as part of that, you will create your job here. So I'll go through the process of showing you a job creation. So you can give it a name, you can call it whatever you want to make it a bit more recognizable. This is the point where you will choose which instance you want it to connect to as well. So I've just called mine the same as the username, but you could call it something to make it a bit more recognizable. You choose which type of job you want here. So for me, this will just be a simple insert. You choose your source. So in this case, mine will just be SFTP, which is the connection that I'm going to use. If you were just wanting to do an upload, you could choose CSV, or also Excel is supported. So that was one thing which people had a bit of it seems kind of small, but it's quite annoying when you're doing this on a regular basis. It's just converting Excel documents into CSV all the time. Sometimes when you open things up in Excel, the formatting changes. So just being able to accept Excel documents straight into the system is a bit helpful for people. And some things which are coming up is, one is Salesforce Export. So this will basically let you, let's say you have a use case of, you have a production instance or two different orgs in a company, and you want to send some data from one org to the other, kind of like a Salesforce to Salesforce connection. You could set up an export job to export all accounts, for example, and use that then in an import source to import into a different org. So you could use it for the Salesforce to Salesforce connection. You could use it to send data from production to Sandbox, or you could also theoretically use it to send data within an organization, for example, from contacts to accounts, or from tasks to cases, whatever it might be. That will be coming up shortly. For the more dev orientated people, there's some advanced options as well. So we have access to the REST API or the Bulk API 2.0, which is the latest one from Salesforce. From my experience, the REST API is kind of the quickest, all the way up to like 50 to 100,000 records. And then when you start getting into like the kind of hundreds of thousands to millions of records, the Bulk API seems to be quite a bit faster. But for most people, I would just recommend staying on the REST API. You can come in and choose the batch size if you want to. So if you have lots of triggers, or in Mark's case, flows probably kicking off from these imports, you can reduce the batch size if you're worried about any CPU limitations or trying to make the jobs go faster. And you can also do things like choose the date format and the separator of the CSV file. But for me, I'll just keep things nice and simple, and we'll go on to the next stage, which is the mapping stage.
Sam, we've got some mid-presentation encouragement for you. Leah said it looks great, and Paul said he loves the ability to change and check the data format on the fly.
Perfect.
2 positives for you. Right,
nice. It's a good 2-0 start.
There you go.
Cool. So now we're on to the part where we basically have to choose the source data and the target data. So one feature which has actually got me quite a few users so far, and I think this is related particularly to dataloader.io and the functionality there, is with SFTP imports. A common use case is you don't always know the exact name of the file that you're going to be importing, because you might have a file called account import, for example, but it's often appended with the current date or something like that at the end. And with other products, for example, dataloader.io, there's no possibility for you to create wildcard selectors, which is what this is here. You always have to specify the exact name of the file. So what something like this does is it basically looks in this SFTP connection that I created, looks in this folder called public FTP, and looks for a file that begins with the number 1 and ends with .csv. And what it does is finds the latest modified file in that folder and will use that for the job processing. So that way you can basically have an audit of all of your different files in the SFTP server, and this one will always pull the latest file. Of course, if you want to just reference like an exact file name, you could come and type it in here and it'll always look for this particular file name, but this just gives you another way to kind of be a bit more flexible with it. And the objects that I'm going to insert into is just the account. Again, you've got access to all of the different objects that can be inserted in Salesforce, and it's searchable as well. So you don't have to kind of, if you've got lots and lots of objects, which orgs often do, you can just search for them there. Cool, and we will go on to the mapping stage now. And this is the part where we're going to basically say what fields from the CSV should go to what fields in Salesforce. So you'll notice if the field names here in the CSV match the Salesforce names, they'll map automatically. So like name goes to name, type goes to type. And you can also change them, obviously. If you don't want type to go to type, you can unselect it. And some other things that you could...
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah, go for it.
When you click there, do you get to see the API name?
Yep. So what you have on the left is the label, and on the right is the API name.
Sorry, yeah, I'm so used to seeing the underscore C. but
Yeah,
the
so
standard
if I
field.
go to like
Yeah.
like this is a custom field here.
Yeah.
So you'll see the label on the left and the API name on the right.
Cool,
Again,
nice and neat.
another thing which is quite annoying, right? If you have 5 different fields which might have the same label or very similar labels, and you can't differentiate between them.
That's exactly the use case. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Yeah, not a problem. Cool. And what you can also do in here, which you can also do in dataloader.io, is look up relationships, right? So another common use case is you have a list of accounts like I have here, but you want to select the owner ID, but you don't have that owner ID in the CSV. So what you would normally do is go into something like data loader or something, or export a report where you have the names and the IDs, and then you have to do a VLOOKUP and kind of do it that way. But with text-based lookups, you can essentially say, okay, I have this column here called owner name, and I want to find the owner based on that name value. So instead of selecting this owner ID column to map, I'll go owner.name. And what that will do is then look through all of the records in Salesforce, look for the names and get the IDs for us and populate those values. So that's kind of available for all lookup relationships or master detail relationships that you might have. And another thing which you can do at this point in time is you also have the ability to create formula columns from within Data Importer. So I can just give you a brief look at what those look like. So some examples might be you want to append or you want to insert today's date into an import to say like last imported date or something like that. What you can do is create a formula called today, and then you could map that formula in here to a date field, and that will always automatically import today's date. So that's kind of trying to save you from having to do that on the Excel side of things. And also another example is you can copy fields. So if you want to map a field twice, you could make a copy of that, and then you have the option to map the same source column 2 times. Or you could also concatenate 2 fields together. So if you're importing, opportunities, and you want to have the opportunity name be the account name field hyphen type field, you could create a formula for that and map that column accordingly. Cool. So, but let's say we're happy with how this looks here. We'll go on to the clean screen. And so what you can do in here is a few of the kind of common data cleaning scenarios that you might have, which commonly come up as part of a data import. So one is, it's a pretty standard one, but it's replacing null values. So for those of you that don't know, if you do an insert into Salesforce or an update, for example, and you have just blanks in the CSV, Salesforce won't actually override those values. So if you have, the contact's birth date populated, and then you do an insert and the birth date is blank for that particular record, Salesforce won't delete that birth date unless you select this button, which basically populates those values with #NA, and those will then be overwritten by nulls. Another thing you can do is deduplicate rows. So if we think about, you get sent a list of contacts that you need to import by someone in the sales team, but they've told you there could be duplicates because it's come from a few different people and we haven't been checking all of that stuff. You can select deduplicate rows and basically put in a column in your source CSV file. And what we'll do is go through the source data, look for duplicates based on the column you've provided. You can also provide multiple columns if you want. So you could do something like this. And based on this criteria, it will then remove all of the duplicates for you and keep just the unique values. So if you had, 5 duplicates based on this, it would delete 4 of them and keep 1 of them. So that's just a way that you can kind of, prevent duplicates from being inserted into Salesforce. You can obviously make duplicate rules on the Salesforce side of things, but you'll just, the error messages that you get are like use one of these records ? Or a custom duplicate error message if you've created one, and it's often can be a bit confusing. So
if you were on this mapping or cleanup, if you were to do the deduplication, is there a summary anywhere that will tell you how many rows have been deduplicated? So, for example, you've got 1,000 rows. You've set your criteria, and you've lost 200 out of 1,000 records.
Yep. So that comes on the next screen here. It'll tell you on the preview screen. It'll say you have removed however many records. So we can give it a quick try, and then we can
nice. If
come back to it and see what happens. So I think in the source data, there's something like maybe 20. Yeah. So this one, all of them have the same value for type, right?
Okay.
So it's removed 20,113 records, and there's now 1 remaining.
Okay.
So obviously this isn't a great example, but yeah, you get a summary here basically of how many records have been removed.
Nice.
Cool. And another pretty common thing to do is when you're doing an insert or an update, you want to test that out, right? Like if you have, for example, my source data here, I have 20,000 records, probably not the smartest idea to just run all 20,000 and see what happens. You want to run a test. And so you would normally, I guess, go into Excel, copy out maybe 10 rows or something, paste it into another file, run that one, check how it goes, and then go back into your original one and go forward from there. So I've kind of tried to simplify that whole process by letting you sample data from within the interface here. So what you can say is, I want to run a sample of 5 records. And what that will do is essentially select 5 random rows from the CSV file and process the job on that row, on those 5 rows. And then something which I'll be able to show you at the end is then you can then quickly just run all of the remaining records. So you don't have to go through and create a new job and say, run all of the remaining ones. You can just do it with a click. So let's go in here and go to the preview screen, and we'll get a preview of the data. Cool. So at this point, again, we can just do some double checkings. We've got our CSV columns on the left side, the ones that have been mapped, 3 example records, and then the fields on the right the fields that have been mapped with some example data. So I can just do a quick validation. And let's say I'm happy with that. I can go submit. Now, because this is coming from an external source, it's not just a CSV file which I've uploaded into the system. I can choose to either schedule this or run it now. For our purposes, I'll just click run it now. And we get to this step here, which is the history page. And here we kind of see what's happening with the job. So we see there's 5 records because I did the sample. It's currently querying the lookup records for us. Shouldn't take too long here. And we can see job complete, right? 5 success records, 0 errors, and how long it took. If we click on view successful, we get a summary output basically of all of the records. We can see that these owner ID values have been populated based on the name that we had. And we have a few options that we can do here. So I've tried to add some kind of some things for safety, for usability, and also some nice to have. So one thing you probably do is you want to do a couple spot checks, right? So these 5 records, it was a sample, so I just want to test if they've worked out. So I can click on view in Salesforce, and it'll actually just take me straight to those records in Salesforce. So I don't have to then again come in and search and figure out which one is which. I've just got that access right from in the interface here. And let's say I've realized something's gone wrong, right? Like these owner ID values haven't populated, or I've missed a mapping, or something's gone wrong, right? Which happens quite often. You have the option in here. You'll see there is a rollback option up the top. And so what that does is basically takes all of these records and will delete them for you automatically. So if I click rollback now, you'll see it's running another job, this one called _rollback. It says that there was 5 records because that's how much were inserted, and 5 successes. So if I refresh these accounts now in Salesforce, you'll get this beautiful error message because they've been deleted automatically for you.
Does the rollback just apply to insert jobs or also update jobs?
One of the most common questions I get, the answer is at the moment, it's just inserts. So there's been quite a few.
Better than nothing, but
yeah,
understandable.
Yeah. So the use case, I guess you were talking about is if you're updating records that you can, I guess, roll back to the previous state, because that's obviously a lot more complex. It's not just deleting. You have to, I guess, remember what the records were before. So it's definitely on the roadmap that you can roll back updated records as well. We would essentially like save a copy of what they were before the update happens. But as of right now, it's just on the inserted records.
Hey, Samuel, I just have one question. Can we save the mapping that we did for this import job and reuse it for some other?
Yeah, so it's all saved automatically. So if I go back to jobs here, this is this one which I've created. And if I go straight to the mapping screen, without kind of going through the whole process again, we'll see that all of the rules like mapping, all of the cleaning rules, like sampling and all of that stuff, it's all saved here. So if I just click clean without doing anything, you'll see that the sample is still set to 5, the deduplicate rule is set to null. All of the stuff as you're going through this process is all saved automatically. So you don't have to click somewhere saying save. I guess by default it saves. And then if you don't need it, you could delete the job if you wanted to.
Can I reuse it for some other job, the same mapping?
Yep, you can. So one way that you can do that is if you, let's say you have a couple of similar imports, right? Like you have an account one, maybe you also want to do one import into production and one into a sandbox and have that running regularly. You have the option to clone the job from here as well. Okay. So you can click down and click clone job. You'll see now there's a clone in here. And so I could say, okay, this one is going to go into the sandbox. So I'll call it sandbox. And I'll switch it over to this other instance here. Click on choose data. The instance is wrong, so it doesn't work. But what you have here is you can essentially clone the two different jobs, or clone the jobs so that you have two different instances. And all of the stuff, again, like mapping, cleaning rules, all of that stuff is saved onto the clone job as well.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Nice.
Cool. So I'll show you one. So if I just, and again, so from this part, because it is a external source, from here I can just click run now and run it from there, because all of the stuff is kind of saved. So if you have, some ad hoc jobs, which are kind of always the same and they're not going to run on a schedule, as long as you've set up all of your mappings and that stuff, you can run it pretty quickly. And let's say I'm happy with these records, right? I'm happy with these 5. I don't want to roll them back and I want to run the full job now. Up here, I can now click run remaining. It'll say, are you sure you want to run the remaining records? Yes. And now we should hopefully see 20,000 and something records in here. There you go, 20,109. And what it does is basically processes the whole file apart from these 5 records. And so that's a quick way that you can, I guess, test a job upload, have a look at some of the records in Salesforce, validate that it's correct, and now it will go through and process all of the remaining records. I'll click abort because I don't need to, we don't need to sit here for 10 minutes while it goes through. Yeah, go for it. Do you have a question?
Yeah, so I have 2 questions actually. So in case of scheduling, I know you haven't used the Salesforce as a baseline platform. So in these kind of schedules, are those calculated against the limits I have in my scheduled jobs in Salesforce?
No,
right?
No. So the only limitations which you will ever run into using this tool is the API calls. So basically each time we're doing an import, for example, it's an API call, but there's no, it's not creating scheduled jobs in Salesforce. So I can show you how you would do that, for example. So if you go into this job, let's say I want to run this, I don't know, every day, right? So you have some, I guess, some flexibility in here. You can come in and click Monday through Friday at 3 a.m. It's set to your time zone by default, but you could change the time zone if you want. Click submit. And now you'll see in here, it's next set to run 25th of February at 3 a.m. European in the Berlin time zone. And this doesn't do anything in Salesforce. So the scheduling is all handled within the platform. All it does is just kicks off this job for you. Yeah, and that's it basically.
All right, that's good. And the other question is like, can I configure, or is there any inbuilt mechanism in case I schedule data and there are some issues with the import? Will it trigger any communication like an email or something, or I'll have to log into the tool and then check if my scheduled job run or not?
Yeah, so we have some notifications built in. So for example, if I go to my details here, you'll see there's these, the email notification settings.
Mm-hmm.
So the options that I have are always, in which case you will always get an email whenever a job finishes. That might be a little bit overkill, especially if you're running jobs a lot. You can set it to never and you'll never get an email, or you can set it to on errors. So if you get if the job runs successfully, you won't get an email. If you get an error, then you'll get an email. And you also have the option here of saying, do you want the success and error files to be attached? So you could, an example is you could set it to on errors, yes, in which case you will only get an email if there's an error and the success and error files will be attached. So you'll get a CSV copy to your email. Now you might not want a CSV copy, you might just want to be notified if it's wrong, and then you can always see the see the failed records from in the platform, but you have that option in here. Yeah, so you can choose that here.
All right, great. Thank you so much. It's really nice.
Nice. And then one last thing, I guess, to check here is so I've got some failed records, right? 200 failed. It's probably just going to say that my dev sandbox is full, which it is, right? And this is kind of a good example. So let's say you have an error. So these are error records. I can see the error message here. One thing which is quite common is the error might be a temporary error. So it might be that in this case, it's saying that my storage is full on the dev sandbox. It might be that a pick list value wasn't active. It might be a validation rule that you didn't turn off, whatever it might be. What you have the option of doing is instead of rolling back, because these have all failed, you can click retry. And what that does is basically only processes the failed records again. So you don't have to, I guess, download the file, create a new job and go through that process. You can just click on retry and say, yes, retry it. Now this one it's going to fail again, right? Because I haven't cleared the storage, but it's a way that you can quickly reprocess a job without having to
rerun it.
Yeah, without having to rerun it and reset it all up. So I'm just trying to make it as quick as possible for people. And one thing which I'm also kind of working on in the background is the most common error that I see when people are doing importing or updating or whatever it might be is validation errors. And so what they often have to do is go into Salesforce, turn the validation off for this import, run the job, go back into Salesforce and turn it back on again. So giving people the option as part of the job process to basically turn validation rules off and back on again. So what will happen is you could, let's say for this particular job, I have a account validation rule that should turn off for the job and turn back on after the job is finished. So as part of this job creation process, you can say, okay, validation rule 1, 2, and 3, I want you to turn off before the job starts, process the job after the job finishes, turn validation rule 1, 2, 3 back on, kind of making that a little bit more efficient for people and obviously helps for scheduled jobs. I know could be a bit controversial as to whether people should be turning validation rules off and on again, but I know that for especially for data that's coming from external systems, they often need to kind of bypass the external data, the validation rule side of things. That's kind of like I guess, a good overview, I would say, of the product and what you can do with it. Is there any questions, I guess, about the demo itself or any kind of feature stuff while I'm still got it open?
I was curious as to the formula editor, and I don't know whether I've linked and missed it, and how much in depth it went. That was just from a kind of a geeky point of view.
No worries. So at the
I
moment,
mean, there was loads of features that you were skipping over. I was like, I want to go further into that because they all look quite cool.
at the moment, it's pretty basic. Like what you can do is essentially add in date columns. So if you want to append like a yesterday or today or tomorrow or now, if it's a time value, you can do things like that. You can reference existing columns in your source data. So for example, if I wanted to make a copy of the owner, I would just come in here in square bracket and type owner. You can have a fixed value as well. So I know that you might want to populate, you might not have in your source data, but you want to populate just a static value for all rows. You can do that with quotation marks. You can do numeric calculations if you wanted to multiply a column value by a standard value. And you can also concatenate two different fields together if you wanted to do like name plus hyphen plus type. That would be the way that you would do it. So some things which some people have asked for, it's obviously a bit more complex, is doing things like if else, like if name is populated, then name, else use the type, else use a static value 1, 2, 3 would be some examples of slightly more complicated ones. But at the moment, it's just trying to cover off some other kind of basic formula use cases.
I guess a quick question now I've got come up there, because use a potential use case I can see in my head with that, with the formula editor, is for like when you're working with like say like mobile phone numbers in when you're putting together your CSV file, because Excel is notorious for removing the leading zero off of mobile numbers in a UK format. Obviously, it might be, I don't know how it works in different countries and stuff like that, but I know for the UK, it always removes the leading zero.
Yeah.
So in my head, I was looking, going, could that work with the formula editor, where you kind of go add a zero in front of it, essentially kind of as more or less text, but put it into like the phone field? Yeah,
so you could do something like if you wanted to have like a zero appended always to, let's just say I had a field called phone number, that would be the syntax that you would use. So that would always add 00 to the front of the phone number field. And I guess a more complex scenario, which isn't there yet, but which I'm kind of working on, is you would do something like if the left of phone number, if the left two characters of phone number are not 00, then add a 00, else just use the phone number. So basically the same as the kind of Salesforce formula syntax, but doing it before it hits Salesforce, so you don't have to kind of worry about doing that on the Salesforce side of things, or having potentially messy data hitting Salesforce. Yep.
Great.
So these are API names that we need to use in the formulas, or?
So these are the name. Yeah, these are the names of whatever the columns are called in your source data. So for example, so these aren't necessarily the Salesforce names, they're the names of whatever your source data is. So in my other example, I had a column called type, in which case I would have one here called type. But yeah, so it's whatever your source columns are called.
Okay.
I have a more general query, which is about data integrity.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm asking because I know you're, because you're not a large vendor with it. So is all the data is processed on your systems? It doesn't just go direct to Salesforce. So sorry, my dog says hello as well. Is this all stored on EU instance? You're based in Germany, so all this stored in EU instances? What's the comforting factors that I can give to a organization if they start to fish around and ask these questions?
Yeah, sure. So we have so there's servers in Frankfurt in Germany. We also have servers in the US, because we have some customers in the US who have their, I guess, contractual obligations that data can never leave the US. And I guess in discussions with other people around the world where they have similar requests. So I guess the answer is, at the moment, we have servers in the EU and also in the US, but we have the ability to pretty quickly spin up new ones in other parts of the world. kind of meet any needs that people have if they need to have data stored and processed in a particular country.
So as part of the setup routine, you get to choose which server you're going to be using.
Yeah, exactly. So when you register for the product, you get to choose basically whether you want to choose the US server or the Germany server, and whichever one you sign up on is the one that you'll stick with.
Hi, just a follow-on question. So the service, I mean, is it cloud-based? Is something like AWS or Azure?
Yeah, so it's based, yeah, exactly. So it's running on a company called Linode,
okay,
who are a smaller, shall we say, I mean, they're still a big company. They just got bought actually for $1 billion. But they, similar kind of setup to AWS. So they have server locations all around the world. They have backups and kind of failure handles and things like that. But yeah, it's all cloud-based. So you don't have to install anything. You don't have to download software like you do with a standard data loader. And you can kind of sign up and get started straight away. So there's no provisioning or anything like that I kind of have to do on my end for you to get started. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks. Because why I'm asking is because work for like a massive really company, and so like a lot of the data loads and stuff are millions and millions of records.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose this could be a use case as well for, big companies going from kind of legacy systems into Salesforce. So just curious about kind of how it handles when it is that millions and millions of rows of data.
Yeah, so I mean, I've done tests with like 100 million records. It almost destroyed my computer when I made the data set, but the system itself can handle it fine. It obviously takes a long time to process, but I don't see the amount of data kind of becoming an issue anytime soon. And yeah, we have people with that exact use case where because I think Excel can only handle up by default up to like just over 1 million rows before it kind of says the data is too big. So people who have more than that amount of rows and want to open it up and check things and stuff kind of run into a bit of an issue. So yeah, it can definitely handle more than that.
Nice.
Like I said, I've kind of tested it with tens or I think up to 100 million rows, and it kind of slowly but surely got there.
Yeah, nice. Thanks.
Cool. If there's no more questions about the product, I've just got a little bit more to go through, and then I'll hand it back over to Mark and Luke. So my goals, I guess, for the product, I guess people have asked me like, why have you done this? Why have you gone up by yourself? Because I'm definitely not earning right now what I was earning before as a Salesforce consultant, and probably won't be for a wee while. So I guess, but my goal is to eventually build myself a sustainable income where the product can essentially pay me a salary that I can comfortably live by. Hopefully, eventually, I'll be able to hire some other people as well, which will be really cool. I want to create the best-in-class data loader product. I feel like from my time working as an admin and a consultant, data importing, data loading, whatever you want to call it, is kind of the part of the project where no one wants to do it. The customer says, I don't want to do it, you should do it. And the client and the consultants quite often will say, well, we don't want to do it either, kind of thing. So I'm trying to make the process for both parties, because at the moment we actually have about a 50-50 split of people using the product who are end customers and consultants. So making the process as easy as possible for both sides. And so one of the ways that I'm doing that, or is that consultants are actually doing it, is for like a migration project or an implementation project, they will kind of do all of the jobs, set up all the jobs. If there's any scheduling or mapping to do, they'll do that. And then they can kind of hand the system over to the customer to manage going forward, so that if there's any minor changes of, there's a new field in their source data and they want to map that, it's pretty easy to do from the interface. If they need to change their scheduling from weekly to daily, they can do that as well. And they don't need to rely on the consultant to, update some code or some batch script, or they don't need someone with real specific Salesforce knowledge to update some Apex code or something like that. And then I guess on a more kind of generic standpoint, I just want to show other people that you can be a solo founder in the Salesforce ecosystem. There's lots of apps out there which, raise lots of money and have lots of employees, I guess, which is obviously a really cool model. And there's lots of cool companies that have come through that. But I'm just hoping to show people that, if you've got a great, it doesn't even need to be a great idea. If you've got an idea and you've got a little bit of skills and knowledge that you can build something, that you can just go ahead and do it. It doesn't need to necessarily be through the App Exchange pathway, although that's probably the most popular, most successful way to do it. But you can just kind of build something, utilize the Salesforce APIs, talk with lots of people, and hopefully build yourself a product.
Very cool.
Yeah. Is there any other kind of, I guess, generic questions or anything else I can help out with?
Are you Sam developing yourself like quite a development backlog? Have you been surprised, obviously, since you've launched the project, the amount of feedback that you've got? What's your backlog look like? Is it bigger, smaller?
It's pretty big. Okay. So I guess there was, I guess, when I launched, there was features that weren't there that I knew I probably should be adding in. So things like sampling the data, it wasn't there on day one. Being able to roll back jobs also wasn't there on day one. So there were some things which I knew I kind of wanted to add in, but my approach was, let's just get an MVP out there and listen to the users really to see what their feedback is. And I guess the part that I found a little bit challenging is, I guess, sorting between the noise of, because some people will obviously have their own individual pain points, which may not be pain points for the general public, I guess. So differentiating between use cases which lots of people have and use cases which only one or a couple people have is sometimes challenging. But it's been a really cool way of doing things, is just talking with as many people as possible, coming on sessions like this where someone will ask a question or say something which I haven't thought about before. It's been a good way of going about it, I think.
Yeah, it's great to watch from a distance. I really like the public approach to it. I think it's brilliant because you see it evolve. Yeah. I don't see any of the questions in the chat.
Okay, so I'll just ask one. How's it going against your expectations?
I would say it's gone probably better than my expectations, to be honest, so far. So like I said, I launched kind of early to mid-December, I think it was. So it's been kind of live for a couple months. Just this week actually hit 100 people or 100 companies who are using it. Not all paid, definitely, but 100 companies were at least finding some value from it, which is really cool. And I guess I didn't expect to have the outreach from people and the support from just people who have been willing to help out and provide feedback with, I guess, nothing expected in return.
I think your transparent approach, there's quite a few companies that put products out there and you try and engage with them and they just make life difficult when you're trying to help them. And they're just missing tricks, but also because sometimes they're other developers who are trying to pivot and do something for Salesforce and are not understanding how the ecosystem works. So the reason why you've got the backing is because you're so wonderful and transparent. You're giving back to us because we're following you on your journey. And you're helping us understand the pain points about app development. So we learn as much. Well, I don't know if we learn as much from the journey as you, but we certainly learn a lot from the journey as well. So
yeah, exactly.
It's a huge thank you.
Yeah, and I guess it would be cool to see, to see other people kind of take up on this as well. So people who are creating other products in the ecosystem, kind of talking about their journey, because other people have been really helpful to me, just talking about, what's the process of listing on the App Exchange, or what's the process of talking with consulting partners, what's the process of going through a sales cycle, and all of those things, which I guess I had minimal experience with before. So yeah, it's kind of, I'm more than happy to share my knowledge and expertise that I've kind of learned in the short time span.
What's your, have you had any engagement, positive or negative, with the competition? I've seen you quite actively respond if people have tweeted things with problems or concerns or frustrated. Say, hey, try this out, or I can fix that. Or have you encountered any?
I've encountered no pushback, shall we say? So, for example, like one of the places where I seem to be getting users from the most is from dataloader.io, because let's say Data Importer has kind of almost all of the features of dataloader.io plus some on top. And dataloader.io, it's quite funny. If you go into the forums, there's people for a time period, I think it was maybe about 8 months or something, they had a bug in their system where people literally couldn't pay for it. So there was people on the forums literally saying, hey, I'm trying to pay for your enterprise plan, but it's not letting me, can you help? And it was just crickets in the forums, where they just didn't respond to anyone. I'm not 100% sure why. I guess, they're part of MuleSoft, so I guess they kind of focus on their more enterprise plans or customers or whatever it may be. And then some of the people who have actually come across the Data Importer have then gone and commented on some of those posts on dataloader.io, saying, I've moved to a different product, or I've moved to dataimporter.io, and they haven't responded to any of those messages either. So I definitely haven't had any pushback. I've had some, I guess, people from not necessarily direct competitors, but people who have similar products add me on LinkedIn or reach out and say, hey, it's really interesting to seeing what you're doing. I'm looking to follow along and stuff like that, which has been really, really cool as well. But I definitely haven't had any kind of pushback from competitors or from Salesforce themselves or anything like that.
Cool.
Just to throw out there, I need to slag them off. I was using spanning backup, which is technically a great solution, but the pain of trying to get through renewals. I was already in a contract and just trying to renew year on year, because you'd have to phone them up and read out your credit card number over the phone. And it's just like, and then they'd start chasing you, but you couldn't actually get through to them to make the payment. So it's just like, I mentally made, so if you can't get that part right, God knows what else is going on.
Yeah.
And also my CEO, who had the credit card, small business, she was in tears, and it's just like, no, it's cost us too much internal energy to get there's competitive products out there.
Yeah. Yes, it's kind of amazing to me as someone who's kind of like fighting to get customers and kind of always on the hunt for new ways to get people to see competitors, just kind of leaving people who are literally begging to give them money, and they just don't even respond. So yeah, obviously I'm not complaining about it. It's a good opportunity for me, but it is interesting to see.
Sam, are you looking to go through the process of getting onto the App Exchange then, or are you kind of like setting that aside for now with the intent to just grow the product more organically?
Yeah, so at the moment, I have no immediate plans. I've kind of started that discussion with Salesforce already. So I'm kind of, let's say, halfway through the process And all that needs to happen is they essentially have to do a security review of the product, which takes the longest amount of time. So I definitely think that's going to be something that happens, because some people, like I said, mentioned, have had not concerns, but they just say, we really like the product. We've tried it out and it looks really cool, but our internal company policy says we can only purchase apps that are listed on the App Exchange. And I think that's probably, as I hopefully get bigger, is gonna pop up more and more. It's obviously a place where, like I did a survey of people, I think it was on LinkedIn, saying like, if you're going to look for a new Salesforce product, where do you go to? And it was kind of like a 50-50 split between the App Exchange and Google. So obviously I'm kind of missing out on a lot of people who would potentially be searching for a new kind of data loading tool. So it's definitely going to be something which I go for, but it's just a matter of time and energy, I guess. And at the moment, it hasn't been a big enough barrier or blocker that I'm not on the App Exchange. So I definitely think at some point this year, probably it'll be listed on there. But exactly when, I guess I'll just see how I go.
Excellent.
Cool.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Sam. Just looks like we've exhausted all of the questions. But I'm sure, Sam, that if anybody does have any questions, you're more than happy to kind of connect with people on Twitter and LinkedIn.
100%.
I've been with everybody. So I think at this point we'll look to move on. We've got 25 minutes left, and we have a couple of bits to get through. So the next bit on the agenda is our Spring 22 highlights. So I'll start sharing my screen again, and we'll pick up on them. And so we've got that, and I'm assuming everybody can see my screen at the moment.
Yeah.
But great, cheers, Luke. So we'll move on to the spring highlights, and we don't have a huge amount this time around. But what I would encourage people to do is to maybe have a bit of a time, have a look on things like this. Salesforce Bend has a good blog on the Spring 22 highlights, for example. Lots of our bloggers have talked about it as well. So we don't go over all of the highlights, and there's a few ones there that you might look and go, oh, these are actually really good, that we haven't covered. So there's quite a few that we haven't included. But we'll start with mine. So as I said at the beginning, all of mine, probably not too much of a surprise, but all of mine are flow related. And that is because I would definitely classify myself as a flow fanatic, and I spend probably far too much time working with flow for different tasks. But first thing I want to mention is that Orchestrator is now generally available in most orgs using Salesforce. So I've done sessions on Orchestrator in the past. I've just done one last week at the Bristol admin user group, and also Cactus Force in January as well. But Orchestrator is essentially, it's a tool where you can group flows together, either grouping screen flows or auto launch flows, and include them in steps and stages to basically create a seamless multi-user, multi-step process. And the pricing information is the bit I'm not the biggest fan of, but I thought it would be worth covering that just for transparency's sake. So it is a Service Cloud SKU, and what you get is 600 annual runs of an orchestration. And basically an orchestration run counts as is basically any time it fires. So if you've got like a record triggered orchestration, once your orchestration launches, that counts within your run count. And after your 600 runs, it is $1 per run after that. And you can buy them essentially, from what I see, you can buy them in bulk from your account by speaking to your account executive. But other than that, I don't have all the information, and Salesforce have not publicly made that information available. So this is information that I've picked up from sources that have come through, and they've all been consistent. And as well, the 690 runs is noted in company information in setup. So this information, certainly at the time of writing, does appear to be accurate. The next slide I've got is flow trigger order. So what this is that you can essentially put in an order number for your record triggered flows. So this is only record triggered flows, it's not screen or scheduled or anything like that. And what it allows you to do is to arrange those flows in a particular order. And how they run is that if your flows are numbered 1 to 1000, they will run first. Flows and then without a number will run following that. And then after that, your third grouping is flows with a number of 1001 to 2000. 2000 is the maximum number you can assign. However, that does not mean you can only have 2000 flows on an object. Although, to be fair, unless you're like a ginormous org, I don't honestly know if I would recommend having that many flows on an object just for the sake of saving your admins certainly the color of their hair for a few years. Because I think you might start getting gray hairs if you have 2000 flows per object to manage. And again, this is just record trigger. It's not counting scheduled and screen flows. So there's a lot of stuff to manage potentially. But I think this is quite a good tool, good piece of functionality. Info transparency, I did try it out earlier this week in a use case I was working through, and it didn't seem to quite work for me then. So the thing I'll mention is just to kind of work through it in sandboxes or in DevOrgs, test it out first and see how it works. But it's the idea is certainly a really good one. I think it's a really helpful one going forward. Next one I've got is Flow Trigger Explorer. And this ties into the same kind of thing. So we've got obviously your trigger order that you can set or schedule in your orders. And what you can do with Flow Trigger Explorer is you can see on an object based on a trigger what flows will run when. And it groups them by before save, which is now referred to in the flow builder's fast field updates. And then you've got after save, which is listed as actions and related records. And then you've got flows that run asynchronously. The thing that I want to kind of really call out with this is that the created or updated trigger, which in Flow Builder for record trigger flows is a separate trigger, same as in Process Builder, that isn't listed as a separate trigger in the Explorer. The three triggers you've got is created, updated, or deleted. So any flows that are set to the created or updated trigger will be listed in both the updated and created view. And as well, there's also a point just to note that at the moment, they are listed in alphabetical order and not in the order of the trigger. So if you have, say, 10 record trigger flows on your account object, and you list them as numbers in the trigger order 1 to 10, it'll list them alphabetically rather than in the order of 1 to 10. That is something that's changing. I'm not sure when that's going to come exactly. It has been mentioned about that being potentially summer, but that is not confirmed yet. So it's forward-looking statement. We'll have that updated later this year. But other than that, it's not quite clear yet. And another little handy thing you can do in there as well is you should be able to see on my screen, but there's a little drop-down icon at the next to the flow label, the far right. You can actually click that, and there's a couple of buttons that pop up there. You can actually open the flow in Flow Builder straight from the Explorer, or you can also click a button that says View Details, and you can see some information in there, including things like your version number and some other information in there. And I'm just conscious, look, I can't see the chat. Was there any questions in the chat coming up from there, or?
There isn't, mate, no.
No, great. Cool, no worries. So my last highlight is the migration to Flow tool. And I'll be quite honest in this one, I have some mixed feelings about this tool. From a usability perspective, I think it's quite good. It's really easy to use. It's simple to migrate your workflow rules into Flow. Again, it's just for workflow rules. Process Builder is due to come out in the summer release under this framework. However, I'll get into that in a second, but what I'll say is, if you look at some of my notes here on the screen, you'll see that there's some workflow rules you can't migrate. You can't migrate, for example, workflow rules where the rule criteria is based on a formula. you can't migrate rows where the rule criteria is based on global variables or record types. And you can't migrate workflow rows where they have in the creates a task or it updates record ownership. All of the rows at the moment can be migrated. So there's some rows you can't migrate. But the thing I would say with this is it's a good tool to use, but I would recommend actually auditing your automation before you migrate across. I did write about it in my blog when I covered about the tool, that my concern with this tool is that it could encourage some organizations to just migrate everything without actually doing any kind of sense checking as to, like, well, should this rule still be used? Should we actually, or how many of these can become maybe combined into one because it's tied to the same process? Those kind of questions where instead of just simply clicking a button and going, right, let's just shift everything across into flow. My opinion is that it's good to kind of look at the older automation that you've got, evaluate it, and make some decisions as to what is the best way to migrate that across. For example, if you've got, say, 3 workflow rows that are all part of the same process, that might be a use case for a flow that uses either subflows, or it could be a use case potentially for orchestrator. So there's different considerations, I think, rather than just simply clicking on a workflow row and migrating. Another key point to note is that the migration tool only migrates one flow at a time. One workflow at a time. So you can't say migrate multiple and kind of run through like a wizard like that. You can only do one at a time. However, it is intelligent enough to detect whether it should be a before save or after save flow. So that's actually quite good as well. And there's also the switch activations component, which you can see there, which actually works quite well. However, I personally probably wouldn't be using it because we tend to do all of this stuff within sandboxes and then migrate across using, we use GearSet. And so switching the activations is more of a thing that would work in production. So I'm not sure I would personally use that either because of those kind of things where we should bring across our automation via a deployment or change set.
So, Mark, just one question. So, this basically does a one-to-one mapping between the workflow and flow?
It does, yes.
Okay. Basically, if I have like 2 different workflows on the same object, let's assume I don't have formulas or anything. It's the simplest ones, but 2 different ones. So there'll be 2 different workflows which will be created, and they will be migrated into 2 different flows then.
Yes, it would. Yeah, so it already migrates a one-to-one, and there's not an option to combine them or create them as like subflows. One other thing I'm personally not necessarily the biggest fan of is how basic is when you migrate them, it creates all the API names and everything like that static. And for me, I tend to use a more of a camel case approach to do my API names. So and you can't edit them when you migrate. So that's another thing that's on there as well. So for me as well, it depends on how you feel about building flows and how confident you are flows. But for me personally, when I was playing around with it, it actually took me longer to migrate the workflow row than it did to recreate it in flow for some of the ones. Now, granted, that's not always going to be the case depending on the complexity of your workflow rows, how much is going on with them. But I found that quite often the ones I experimented with and played around with, it was quicker for me just to rebuild the flow myself. And that way I was able to work with like my API names in the way that works for myself.
And it doesn't matter like how many actions I have in a single workflow.
No, it doesn't. So as long as those actions and the email alerts and all that kind of stuff are within what is currently able to be migrated. So again, if you've got a workflow that includes a task, an email alert, and a field update, that won't be able to be migrated because you have a task involved. But as long as you're keeping to what is able to be migrated, it doesn't matter how much is in there, you can still migrate it.
Okay. Seems like I'll still have, I would prefer to wait because it's it's still in the beginner stage, I'll say, because most of the organizations will have the formula based or the record ownership updates and more complex type of flows rather than a very simple ones built in.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it's a good tool to use, but my kind of thing would be I would only use it if I would be if I would not be doing anything other than what's in that workflow already. But my personal preference, I would probably just rebuild it, but it depends on different orgs. This is probably could be quite handy for smaller organizations where they've got an admin who maybe isn't feeling as comfortable with Flow yet, to migrate those things across and work for that. So, but again, it's just a bit more sensible, I think, to review your automation before migrating.
Yep.
Cool, great. So the next one, and this is our last highlight we've got. This is yours, Luke.
Yeah, so on a different topic other than Flow, there's two things I spotted out of the Spring 22 highlights. One's a sales cloud feature and one's a service cloud feature. So I'm sorry, I'm not giving much away with the two screenshots I've got off there, but I've tried to explain them and then let's see if I get it, understand it. But the first one, there's a feature called Revenue Intelligence, which is a sales cloud feature. So for anyone in commercial organizations that likes forecasting, this is a good sort of partnership or pair up between standard Sales Cloud, Tableau CRM for the reporting element, and Einstein for some of the prediction elements. But I watched the video on this and I thought what was really cool is you can take your standard forecast that you have pre-built within Sales Cloud, but you can really drill into it in a very interactive and intuitive way. So you can look at the performance of your team, how you're looking against your forecast compared to last year, 3 months ago, 1 month ago. You can look at the individual performance of your employees, growth, decline, what's changed in the last week. Are there any other key features? You can review activities. So I think theoretically it would mean that you'd have to have Tableau licenses. But what I like is that it's standard Sales Cloud functionality. There's an awful big analytics engine sort of built into it. And I think it's giving you the information, what you need at the right place in the right time. So I think it's if you get the chance to look at Revenue Intelligence and look into the video, there's a lot more behind it that sells it better than I did. But I think it's good because it's working with standard stuff out of the box and there's an awful lot of information in there. Second one, which I thought was intriguing. I'm not such a fan of the name of swarming, but this is a really good one for support-based organizations. So you can see an example of a service console that's on the screen there, or a particular case. Now, what happens is, imagining that me, Mark, Paul, Sam, if we were working a support organization, if I'm stuck on a case, I've done a triage, I've tried to assess it, I need some additional support. From within Salesforce, you can generate what is called a swarm. So there's a connect between Slack and Salesforce. So I'm within Salesforce, I'm in my native window, I initiate a swarm by inviting Mark, Paul, and Sam, or Sheetal, and then it takes you into Slack with those particular members. It brings in the case detail from Salesforce. You can talk about it in Slack, push that information back to Salesforce, and then end the swarm. So it's just like an isolated, it takes you out of Salesforce into somewhere different. You've got a bit of control over who you invite, things that you capture or actions you can pass back across. And I think it's just an intriguing insight into what might come in the future. I think, they're looking at them integrations, and I'm working with a client at the minute. I won't name them, but I think it could be a great use case for them. They're very Slack heavy users anyway. I think that needs a bit of control and governance around how they use their channels. And so I thought this notion of swarming was good. It will probably take a lot of time, but I think it'll be quite cool in the future. There were just two things I spotted from the Spring 22 highlights: one for sales, one for service.
Great. Well, cheers, Luke. And I guess while I'm going to shift over, we're going to shift over to the giveaway now. But whilst I'm getting that set up, one thing I think would be a good question to potentially ask, if we stop sharing my screen, is has anybody else seen any kind of highlights from the spring release that they thought were really, really cool and liked.
Not
Yeah.
me. No.
No.
Really, something Paul doesn't have an opinion on? I'm surprised.
Yeah, I think this one's been quite a quiet release in many ways. Like there's a couple extra bits which I quite liked, which we haven't talked about here, but like the ability to add like expiration dates to permission sets. That I think could be a really good bit for a change. Like kind of working through. Brian's mentioned in the chat record collection filters and flows. Yes, that looks to be really good. Personally, I haven't actually tried that yet, but I imagine that will be a good little tool. The Flow Fest event that happened yesterday actually had some of their challenges based around record collection filters. So that's kind of like my homework over the weekend to try out some of them. And thanks, Paul. I've just seen your message there, so I'll give you that as well. And the other one I quite liked from just as I'm doing the admin that we haven't covered is how you can actually now do edit inline multiple fields inside of reports. That so it kind of allows you to essentially do stuff that we do in often do in list views, but we without the need to actually filter by record type. I think that could be potentially a big game changer for admins in that. But yes, so I've got the names ready for the duck race, and so there's some exclusions.
For anyone that doesn't know what it is, you're just about to find out.
Yes, exactly. So I'm going to share my screen. We have a few less names than we normally would do. So you've got that. We've got 5 names, so you have a 1 in 5 chance of winning. For those who are on here, and so I'll open that up now, and then. But I'm also going to see if we can actually share the sound, because you can actually hear the ducks going on and quacking, which is always fun. So let me just share that screen. I've got our names in there. I'm going to add 10 seconds. Actually, no, let's do 15. Make it a nice round 15.
Build the suspense.
Build the suspense a little bit. And I will, let's set it. And all was ready to go. And here we go.
Go, 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 go. Which number should I shout for?
Leah and Cheetah.
Oh, Cheetah's to the front.
Oh, come on.
I think you're coming up from the back.
Brian's scooting ahead.
Oh, it's Brian. Right. So, congratulations, Brian. You have won I believe, another certification voucher for us. I think you won one from us last year as well. So, congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, that'll go into some good use.
I think I've won 2 previously, so Mark, I'm happy for this to go to someone else who hasn't won. So I don't mind just deferring this. If that's okay.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's kind of you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Brian. So I guess in that case, then, shall we open up the floor to the remaining 4 participants and maybe ask who is anybody looking to take a certification? Bear in mind, these are for the $200 or $400 exams, which is most of them. But obviously, if you're looking to do CTA, that isn't covered.
Yeah, I am looking for FSM. Please, if possible.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
See, I have been in a very bad luck. I have been into the races where there were only 3 ducks till I didn't win. So
Great. Well, I'll tell you what we'll do then, because Leah, I think you have actually got a certification voucher en route.
There's one on the way to you, Leah. From
Oh, it's on the way. Okay, yeah.
So
I remember
back in the last
said
year.
on LinkedIn. Yeah.
So we just hopefully you'll have an email coming from the community team in the next few days. That email went out yesterday morning. I think I sent it yesterday morning. Might have been.
Yeah, it was
Tuesday.
yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah. So Sheetal, we'll sort that out with you.
Yeah, we'll hopefully help you out with FSL and get that one.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Great.
My night well spent then.
So, yes, yeah. Considering it's midnight where you are, then yeah, you deserve
Oh yes,
you
it's
deserve a
now
voucher.
the new day started for me now. It's 1 a.m. in the morning.
Oh. Well, we won't be too much longer.
Yeah,
we will have our closing announcements, so let me just quickly go back into sharing my screen, and we'll highlight those announcements. I have to admit, Luke, are you able to pull the links from Slack and share them in?
Yes.
In the chat.
Yeah, I'm sure I can do that. No problem.
Yeah, they should be in the thread, and there would be hyperlinks. You might have to just copy the link rather than copying the text.
Okay, mate. I'll have a look for them, but yeah, no worries. Don't worry. You start.
Yeah, and the only one, and I think yours in there's a proper hyperlink. Mine's the ones I've linked them. Okay,
right.
So closing announcements we've got. We don't actually have too many this month. What we have is London's Calling. Last month we mentioned London's Calling because the call for speakers was open. That's now since closed. However, in between our last event and this one, the tickets for London's Calling have become available. So if you were to hop onto the London's Calling website, you would be able to get the tickets from there. Unfortunately, the early bird ones have already gone, but it's a conference that's really worth going to. It's a one that is really, really good. I went for the first time in 2019. Missed 2020, but I was there last year for the virtual one. But this time it's back in person in London, so it's going to be a really good event, and it'll be great to see a lot of different people there as well. So that's the London's Calling event, and that is on June 10th. For those who don't know that date, it's June 10th. Next one I want to share is we'll try and get these things into the chat. Is the events overview. So you might have seen a post I went around on Twitter the other day from, I think it was Louise Lockie who shared the one I spotted. But the events overview is just a simple little page that Salesforce have put out where it has the dates for the world tours, Trailblazers DX or Trailblazer DX. I keep wanting to say Trailblazers DX, was not Trailblazer DX, and Dreamforce. So that's one of the things that might be very helpful to you if you're kind of plan around your calendar and stuff like that, or if you're involved in other community activities.
It would be helpful if I could find the link in Slack, but I can't.
Right. Okay. I will pull out those links then.
Yeah, no worries.
And I'll put them all in the chat. That shouldn't take me too long to find them. And talking about the event overview, Trailblazer DX is happening. That is happening in April. It is if I had my calendar on me, I should have those dates to hand. But it is the last week of April, and I believe it starts on the Wednesday. I think it's the 27th and the 28th. Yeah, I think that's the dates on the top of my head. And that's Trailer DX is actually quite a good conference. I have enjoyed it the last couple of years I've attended. And they're trying to make it more open to everybody, which is why they've changed the name. So they're trying to have some more admin focused stuff there as well this time around. So it should be a good conference. And one of the highs, if you went to there last year, was Trailhead DX last year was when they announced the UX designer certification coming out. It's when they kind of really pushed that. So it could well be a good possibility that we'll see something else similar to that coming out from that. For example, the designer strategist role was recently announced at Cactus Force. So we might find a fair bit of stuff around the design strategist role, for example, being done at Trailblazer DX. Last one for me I want to share. It's just a little handy little tool I've been using a lot on from Google Chrome lately. And it's something I've been using for documentation, but I just thought it'd be a nice little cool thing to share. It's called Go Full Page, and what it does is it's a Chrome extension, and essentially you click on the button for the extension, and it'll scroll down your entire web page, and we'll save that as a screenshot, which you can download as a PNG or a PDF. is something I've been using quite a bit for like stuff I've been working with documentation. I've been using that to screenshot like process builders, for example, doing a migration review. I've been doing for a client, and I think it's just a really nice, handy feature in Chrome. And the last one is over to Luke.
Yeah, so in previous events, I'd shared a series that Apex Hours had done on Service Cloud, which is I think 12 hours worth of sessions from different guest speakers, just about getting to know Service Cloud. And I thought it was a pretty great set of resources. And then I just noticed recently, it was earlier this month in Feb, but and Cheetal, this might be good for you, but they've just released a field service lightning playlist as well. So I do actually have the link to
Yep.
to
I'm
that
closely
one.
following Apex Hours.
Nice. I was going to say, so I'll just post that one in the chat. But yeah, Apex Hours do some great stuff. They've got great curated playlists of content for refreshers, for learning, for new starters, or for advanced users. So I'd come across it and thought it might be good if anyone on the call's into that. So I thought I'd share it.
Great. Cheers, Zug. And with that, other than I'll quickly dig out those links in Slack and I'll share them into the chat before we officially wrap up. But I just want to say a big thank you to everyone. Thanks again to Sam for speaking to us. It's been really good to see Data Importer IO being presented. So we really appreciate that. And thank you to everybody for coming. And as well, again, congratulations to Cheetal for being our certification voucher winner. But all that being said, I'm going to stop the recording. And if anybody does want to stick around for a bit, we will leave the room open. But at this time, just want to say thanks for coming, and I'll stop the recording.